What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of SSPN, Ethan. Last time we were like, we finally had some basketball to watch, but this time, Ethan, we finally had some Victor Wembanyama to watch. So let's just go through the games. Let's start off with the bad so that we can finish off with the full course entree that was last night that probably led to the news about him getting shut down after 2 games as well. I'm sure a lot of that has to do with wear and tear. But when you consider the dichotomy and the bounce back that he had last night, it wasn't too surprising, Ethan.
No, it wasn't. And to start with game one and his struggles, we both we concluded our last podcast by saying, don't be surprised if he gets dunked on or he falls over or he's not as, he doesn't live up to the incredible hype that was put before him going into game one. Like, expect some downsides, and that's exactly what happened. Like, I don't think he played terribly. I think defensively he was outstanding. He had 5 blocks. He showed some flashes of being a terrific playmaker. He could play basically 3, 4, or 5 because of his ball handling ability. He just couldn't find the bottom of the basket, and it did look at times like he was a little uncomfortable, didn't know where to be. Obviously he's very lanky and not that strong yet, so he was pushed over a little bit, pushed around a little bit. So there were all those struggles that we kind of knew existed before, like going into it. So it shouldn't have been a surprise, but because of all the hype, because it was the number 1 pick, because it sold out in like less than 24 hours, I think the rest of the world was kind of expecting 30, 20, and 20 from him, and that just didn't happen. So these are things that he can learn from. I'm glad that he had that experience in game 1 because to me, it took the pressure off of his shoulders going into game 2 and allowed him to kind of play at a different kind of ease. And I'm hoping, and I'm pretty sure he heard the hate, and that probably it was a contributing factor to how aggressive he came out in game 2.
Yeah, I'm sure. There was a lot of stuff going on in that first game. I don't want to make excuses, but and this is something he's going to have to deal with. And we saw the response in game 2, but just talking about game 1, I think the things that are important to mention just to keep the full context in mind is 1, the Britney Spears situation, which I joked about on the last episode. But also like when you're getting asked those questions and then you've got like all of her stands like in your comments for the first time, like, and I don't know, maybe you experience a little bit of that in France, but it feels like to me, like the whole like stan culture, like literally the name Stan is from an Eminem song. And I know I'm getting in the weeds here, but like that's kind of a US culture thing on social media. Obviously you have like the crazy, like, K-pop bands where a lot of those fans are, not from the US, but are very crazy and rabid. I mean, you can find it anywhere, but that culture originated, in the US kind of Hollywood scene. So when you have all of that context draped behind the Britney situation, and then you have the 2 different stories, the TMZ stuff. I know really in the grand scheme of things, it didn't matter, but I'm sure that affected him to some extent. Just like, I mean, especially if he was on his phone and saw like all of the Britney stands in his comment, like calling him a POS and, like
you're not wrong,
majorly insulting him, I mean, that's kind of a dichotomy from, the way that he was probably treated at NBA Con. He also had responsibilities at NBA Con. And of course, it being sold out in the Thomas and Mack Center with 19,000 tickets and seats being sold, and all of those people being there on him, all of the oohs and ahs every single time he touched the ball. Once again, it's not excuses. This is something that's going to happen his entire career. But when you also factor in, I know this is a lot of context. I've factored in a lot of stuff.
You're good.
But all of that stuff, Ethan, on top of the fact he hasn't played really or practiced really, other than the training camp 2 days before, the California Classic, where he didn't even travel, with the team there. He just had those 2 little, and that was the first time he played basketball since the LNB Pro A Finals.
He's had 2 practices.
In all of the press conferences. Just go watch his press conferences, because it's like, if you watch his first press conference, everything that he basically said, like he literally said, I honestly didn't know what I was doing out there. You could see the difference from game 1 to game 2. It's just 2 games. It's just summer league. There's still going to be a lot of struggles. There's still going to be a lot of adjustments, but also it showed that he is able to adjust, able to improve, and able to learn from all of the people around him, and able to have night and day performances, at least offensively, in games just, one day apart.
Absolutely. And he did only have 2 practices, like you said, prior to game 1. And he hadn't played that much basketball because these are the reports that his agent has put out there to media outlets, is that after game 1, Wemby called his agent and said, I need to focus on basketball. Cancel events, cancel parties. I haven't had an opportunity to actually get in the gym and play the past couple of days. I need to get my rest. I'm fatigued. I need my sleep, and I need to get in the gym and just refocus on what's the most important, and that's playing basketball. So he was able to do that, I think, going into game 2. That definitely had an impact on how he was
that
able
party,
to play.
like you said, just to add some context to what you're saying, that party was the night after the Spurs' first loss.
Yes.
Decided to get some rest instead of going to the party.
And just to put it in basketball perspective too, the team was rolling. The 2 games in LA, we were on a different level, and then suddenly the number 1 pick is put into the starting lineup, and it's like, okay, where does he like the ball? Where does he want his spots? And there was clearly like a disillusionment with the entire team. It felt kind of like AAU, where it was like, who wants it right now? You? Okay, like let's give it to Wemby. I guess ISO him at the 3-point line. Let's see what he can do. Like there was clearly a disconnect.
You're talking about game 1 right now?
Game one.
Just making sure I'm keeping track. Right.
And a little bit in game 2, but not nearly as much. In game 2, he felt more comfortable. So even if there was kind of a disconnect and still trying to feel each other out process, because we saw glimpses of that, especially in the fourth quarter come clutch time. But for the most part, I think he was kind of more comfortable in his own skin, kind of getting to his spot and letting the game come to him. But yeah, if you want to talk more about game 1, I can pass it back to you. I don't want to jump ahead.
No, you're good. I just wanted to say that in that game 1, it was an ugly game, straight up for everybody.
It was.
Obviously, Champagnie and Malachi still shot better in that game than they did in game 2. But at the same time, I guess the point that I'm trying to make here with game 1 is our ugliness and our just out of rhythmness was able to be overcome by, one, Wembanyama's defensive impact. I would say that definitely plays a factor with his 5 blocks, his length, everything like that, but also with just how bad the Hornets have been in summer league so far. I mean, you saw when we were completely in sync in that first game, and I know you could say, well, how are you in sync the first game? It's just, y'all know we beat the crap out of the Hornets the first time we played them in the California Classic. And while you would think, oh, you add Wembanyama to that, and even I was having that thought, like drooling over it, when I was in Galveston this past week, it's like, these guys haven't played with him yet. And before that, it was like they all knew where to go. Champagnie, Blake, Malachi. CD's a new addition. But still, like at least those 3 that I just mentioned have extensive time playing together. Oh, Barlow. I'm forgetting Barlow, of course. And so it's like there was just an established order, an established style of play that they've been playing and practicing either in Austin or in San Antonio the past season, because all of those guys were in between San Antonio and Austin. And even Champagnie, who wasn't I don't know if Champagnie actually went down. He might have a little bit, but regardless, it doesn't matter because by the time he was actually on the roster, all those other guys were not playing in Austin anymore because it was the end of the season. And so the point is they had all their chemistry. And you throw Victor in there, and while it seems like, oh, everything's just going to be great, that's not basketball. No. Especially when you factor in, once again, all of the context I mentioned earlier, with him still needing to get back on the court and get comfortable. And, you kind of stole my line there, Ethan, where you were talking about some of the stuff his agent was saying and what he called and even what he said in yesterday's press conference after his bounce back performance, which is kind of what I wanted to lead into, but I got off track with some other stuff. And that's how he said, I am going to disappear from the media for like months. And that is, San Antonio is the perfect place to do that, the perfect set of circumstances. The franchise that has wanted to do that the most, over the past 2 decades is us. and Popovich with his reputation with the media. They even mentioned on the broadcast last night, they asked Pop to come on. He was like, "Elkin, you know what?" And so it just obviously, I'm being a little bit facetious there, but it's just one of the other aspects of this with the French connection, and then now this kind of realization after going through the circus, that just since the draft, he's definitely on the Spurs vibes, if you will, Ethan. But I love to see it, and it's important, and I think it just once again reiterates how dedicated this guy is to basketball and how little he cares about all of the other stuff and how winning is most important. And that was one of the other things he mentioned last night was, obviously he was very happy with the bounce back game, disappointed they couldn't get the win. And that's as much as he heard a lot of the hate and wanted to come back, like you were saying earlier. I think the one thing that really helped for him on that first game is that they were able to get the win. And even though it was super ugly, they were in control for most of the game ahead of the Hornets by 10 or so points the whole time. But with all that being said, Ethan, I think I've kind of said all that can be said about the first game. So let's talk about the good. Just give me your overall breakdown of what you saw from him last night.
Going into the game, I was so scared. I was literally like this close to my television set, like not even a computer, like an actual full screen TV. Just like, please hit your first shot. Please do something. And I think when he hit that first mid-range jumper, it was just a catch and shoot, classic LaMarcus Aldridge pick and pop play. And he knocked it down. And from that point forward, it was like the monkey is off of his back. And he was able to comfortably move around the court. He didn't look nearly as lost offensively or defensively. Sure, he had a couple of moments where he was physically outmatched, didn't go for rebounds as aggressively as maybe you'd want him to. But for the most part, he was physical. He wasn't afraid of the contact. He was looking for it. And he got baskets on the inside, the mid-range, and from the three-point line. And he just let the game come to him. And at times,
got to the line a lot too.
Got to the free throw line. What was he, 7 for 12? He missed like
something
5.
Like that. He needs to improve there. But if you watched in the French league, you knew that's somewhere where he's going to get improved. But the point is, him getting there after the first game, he only got there twice. He did go for 4 for 4 in the first game, but that's just that's something that he's really going to take advantage of because of his length. But back to what you were saying.
For sure. And the biggest takeaway positive-wise was how aggressive he was. Because I texted you and a few other friends in game 1, and I was like, man, he just needs to be more assertive. Like, he looks scared around the rim. Like, he's not looking for his own shot. And game 2, he was very assertive. He had the putback dunk. He had an and one bank shot. He had a dirty full-court pass from Champagny, or half-court pass from Champagny that he just threw down over his defender.
The two posters.
That's the aggressiveness that we need from him. I don't care if he's skinny. He's 8 feet tall. He can throw it down over most guys if he can get positioning like he did consistently, I might add. He got positioning so much that the guards just didn't see. And again, that's probably the chemistry thing. They're just not used to having a big threat like that. So I think he could have had even a better game had Blake and Champagny and Malachi been kind of looking for him more often. I don't think he got nearly as many touches as he should have gotten. But overall, it was a very, very good game from him. Great bounce back game. I can see why the Spurs would shut him down now because, we've seen what we need to see. We can go into the offseason, into training camp with a solid path plan and how we're going to use him going into October.
And lessen his load, which therefore lessens the risk of injury. And there's no point. I mean, yes, there's a lot that he could learn from the rest of these games, but let's be honest, it's going to get a little chippy, especially when you get into the summer league playoffs. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, the Spurs have got to get there first, but I know they lost last night, but it seems like Portland's one of the better teams in this summer league. I know they lost the first game on that buzzer beater to Jabari Smith, but if you watch that game, Scoot Henderson had a pretty good game. And I mean, man, his backup last night, that DeVoe guy went crazy, which was just ridiculous. I like that Blake bounced back in the fourth quarter with some good defensive plays, but really need to see he got a lot by DeVoe early in that game, and that's not really what you want to see. But still, without his defensive efforts and those steals and the way he was pressing DeVoe in the fourth quarter, I don't think that we get the momentum that we do I mean, obviously, I think Wembenyama will still make some plays, but I think that those defensive plays by Blake in the fourth quarter were integral to having a chance to come back. So I don't just want to completely crap on him and take that away from him. But I got to just talk about these guys. I want to get back into Wemby, but you mentioned Malachi, Champagnie, and Blake. And I think really, Ethan, we could sit here and we could talk about how they struggled last night. But kind of what you've seen is a devolution through Summer League. I know it's only 4 games, but it's like all of them. Obviously, Malachi hasn't played all of them, but Blake and Champagnie have. Blake didn't have the greatest first game, but still had, a solid second and third game. Champagnie was on fire until last night. He was the leading scorer in every game. Well, I think Malachi was the leading scorer in the second California Classic game, but he still had 28. The main thing with these guys, that's what I was saying. I was saying I'm not going to go into it, and then I did. But the main thing with them is they haven't played with anybody like that ever. And this past season is their only season with the Spurs. So they have no idea how to play with somebody like that. And that's not, I'm not trying to say that, I'm not trying to make excuses or say that they, they were fine with what they did. Obviously, on the 3, Blake needs to pass it back to Wemby. Doris Burke said it on the broadcast. There was another possession with Malachi, needs to do the same thing. But at the same time, especially with Malachi and Champagnie, I'm not really too worried about them. They're just going to need to learn how to play with that guy and also need to learn how to know their role. Because you got to understand, the first 2 games, they're the guys taking the shot every time. And I know Malachi had a terrible shooting night last night. But, I mean, go to the second game of the California Classic and you can find a beautiful shooting performance. It was, this was the first time I would say, even though it's a Summer League game, that there were some better looks that Malachi could have gotten. And it's not necessarily the shots that he took, but he just could have found teammates, specifically Wembenyama, but also other guys as well, where he didn't need to force it as much. Now, obviously, that kind of was his role. And it's like, he probably just wanted to get one down with how poorly he was shooting. But the most important thing is winning the game. And when you have a close possession game like that, that's when you kind of got to worry less about you getting one down and, finding the best shot for the team. But these are all, as much as it seems bad last night from them, it's really a great learning experience.
Yeah, Malachi was just very clearly frustrated. Like from the jump, like first quarter, he looked pissed because he wasn't getting any calls. And I don't want to completely blame the refs because he had some bad looks and he had some bad shots that just didn't go in. But like there were a couple physical defensive plays.
So much ticky-tacky
that
stuff, especially with CD. Sorry, I don't mean to.
No, you're fine.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It felt like the Blazers were getting a lot of calls and Malachi and Champagnie were just not. And I mean, I don't have the exact stat in front of me, but it was clearly frustrating both of those players. That's just an eye test. I don't have any statistics to back that up. But Blake, I actually thought second half Blake was the second most important player. First half Blake, you're right. He got cooked. He got absolutely cooked in that first half. And I think that there was an adjustment made. I don't know if it was him or Nielsen, but from the third quarter on, he picked up DeVoe. I think DeVoe had 20
ball pressure
going into the first half, and he finished with 29? So we only had like 9 points in the second half. And one of those was a 3 at the very end of the game. That was just like a fast break opportunity that after Blake missed the 3, I think is when it was. So I'm willing to let that slide.
You're right.
But second half, Blake was on another level. And Doris Burke was talking about it too. The way he was picking up DeVoe full court and just harassing him and really not getting into foul trouble. Like he was cleanly trying to swipe at the ball and just irritate him. And I think that worked. And offensively too, he was doing his best to be speed kills. He was trying to infiltrate the paint and kick the ball out to whoever was open. And he still impressed me with his control. I think he had a lot better control in the third game as well. So there were definitely positives to take from him. And what did he have at the end? 14 points, something like that?
I'm about to go look at the stats.
I think he had 14. Yeah, 14 points. And a -2 in the plus-minus. That's probably stems from his first half performance because it was really abysmal. But he picked it up in the second half. And then Barlow's a guy we haven't talked about yet. He had a great game as well. He had an energy scoring game where he was in the right place at the right time, doing everything in his power to kind of alleviate the physicality that Wemby would have had to take.
Yes.
On. And I think that's exactly what we can expect from guys like Zach Collins and Jeremy Sohan next season. I think that they will have a very similar role, taking off physicality, going for loose balls, trying to get as many rebounds as they can, and just being in the right place at the right time to clean things up. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty much everybody that had an impact. Everyone else was kind of MIA, unfortunately.
Yeah, so just to read the stat line to give some more context to what you were saying. Oh, well, do want to give a shout out to CD. CD quietly shot 100% last night.
Yeah, he played very well.
At 8 points. He had 6 fouls, dude. Okay, let me talk about this. One, I can see how you mentioned when we were did our little talk about him after the draft, and you were saying he fouls out a lot. I can see that now. The thing that frustrates me, Ethan, is like, when he's getting, sometimes I'm not even mad at the ref, but it's like the fouls that he gets called for, like I'm not mad at him. Like he's just always trying to make a play and is like just like the littlest too much physical. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like
yes.
It just touches him a little bit too much. Like it's like almost like you don't have to call it. But I understand why they do. I like the 2 threes he shot last night. Granted, that's a very small sample size, but they looked much better than the other threes he'd taken so far in Summer League. If y'all have seen those, they did not look, they looked horrible. And these 2 were perfect swishes. And we saw some shades of that throughout his season with the Ignite. But more importantly, Ethan, just a physical junkyard dog, dude. He does a bunch of stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. Like, at all. And especially defensively, Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer, he was tweeting about it in the first game, and when Wemby wasn't playing that great, and he was like, nobody can get by CD Sissoko right now. He is just, I mean, he's like a brick wall when you try to run into him. Like I said, there's a lot of refinement. There's a lot of stuff that he's got to do. He's got to not foul as much. But man, he uses his frame to a T.
Yeah, he bites on every pump fake. I mean, if he stopped biting on every pump fake, he probably would have only had like 3 fouls in this game. But he goes for everything, and that's part of what makes him so good defensively, is that he's so physical, like you were saying. I had one more thought on CD that I forgot. Oh, he held Shaedon Sharp 0 for 9 in the first half.
Yeah,
that's difficult to do. The guy's athletic.
His defense is popping out, and he's a good shooter too. Everybody has bad games, but CD Sissoko's defense is probably going a little bit. It's probably not getting talked about as much as it should be, although there have been some little talks here and there. But going back to the stat sheet, Ethan, I wanted to read this for everybody. So obviously, Malachi 1 for 17, 1 for 8, and 3 for 6 at the free throw line, which is surprising. 6 points total, 4 assists, a steal, 2 boards. Champagny. And this is why I think I like Champagny's game a little bit more. 1 for 6. He knew he wasn't shooting well, so he kind of just stopped shooting, and was able to get 6 boards, 2 assists. Still had a rough game, but I kind of did like that he didn't try to force it too much. Granted, Malachi is probably who you want taking the most shots, second to Wemby. But in this game, definitely a learning experience for Malachi. I already kind of talked about it. Blake Wesley, 4 for 8, but 5 for 7 from the free throw line with 14 points and 5 assists, with a steal as well, one of the most clutch steals of the game. But I didn't realize how much he got to the line in this game, Ethan. That's another good sign from him. And then, of course, Dominic Barlow, 8 for 12 overall. We saw the midi pop again, and that was after he missed a couple to start the game. So I love to see that bounce back. 6 boards, 2 blocks, 2 assists, 17 points. And like you mentioned, a lot of those rebounds, he was going for them on a lot of them were second chance rebounds, but more importantly, he was just a lot of time he was taking that physicality load off of Wembanyama, banging down low in the paint. And he's not even the biggest guy. So to see the effort from him and the rebound chasing from him and then the success in that is once again just a testament to his potential and another positive sign from him. And it also encapsulates him just embracing his role next to Wembanyama, which you love to see as well. And then, of course, Victor, 9 for 17, 2 for 4 from 3, 7 of 12 from the free throw line, 12 boards, 1 steal, 3 blocks, and 27 points. And really, there were a couple possessions, more blocks that you could add that, they were kind of close to being tipped or not. Like I think they actually updated this to 3 today because I saw it was 2 last night. And that was probably because of the plays that I'm about to talk about. There were a bunch of threes, some other, jumpers, basically all jump shots there. Yeah. Floaters, stuff like that, where he just, even if he didn't touch it, where there were some that he could have that might've not been listed as blocks. It was hard to tell because he would have just grazed it. He affected the shot tremendously, like to the point where even if he didn't touch it, it was still an air ball. It was like the equivalent of a block, just because you can't it was some 6'2" dude trying to shoot over a guy with an 8-foot wingspan.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was gonna say Dan Patrick this morning said that they need to add a new stat for Wemby called shots altered per game.
Yes.
Because he impacts almost every shot within a 10-foot radius of his body.
That was literally the point that I was going to. I was just going to say that you could maybe even say that he had more than 3. I thought it was 2 earlier today. I think they added 1, but it's just literally because of what you were just talking about. So,
and Kareem,
go ahead.
Sorry to cut you. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Jerry West said that he has shades of Bill Russell defensively, because Bill Russell wasn't swatting balls into the second row, but he was like keeping balls in play with his blocks, and defensively his impact was just so tremendous on every single possession. And he goes about his game kind of quietly. Like Wemby's not forceful defensively,
right,
but he's extremely impactful.
Yes, very present. That's some praise. That's some praise that you got to be happy about for sure. I know this dude's been getting every praise, but now, off of actual game film and from a bounce back, you love to see that. But just to give my little breakdown on Wembanyama's game 2, I think for me, it was very similar to what you were saying when you saw that first pick and pop mid-range jumper go down super smoothly. You felt a lot better. I felt like he was gonna. I was feeling more on the positive side, but I was definitely nervous. I was like, "There's no way he plays like that again." Like literally, Ethan. After the first game, bro, I went and rewatched the G League Ignite game, because I was like, "No, man, he just hasn't played in a while." Like I was like, "There's no way that's him." Like I've seen him in a situation where he's basically playing the same caliber of talent, if not an even more talented team, and this dude has had 40 and 10 basically in back-to-back games. You know what I mean? Like, so there was some off-balance stuff. You saw the balance was a lot better in game 2. There were still like one play, I think, where he lost the ball. But I just feel like he's going to continue to get better everywhere. And now the next time we see him play, though, it's going to be a completely different animal. Even in preseason, there's going to be some more athletes. There's going to be more adjustments. But in the little 2-game span that we saw, I mean, game 2, there wasn't really anything better than you could ask for, other than him maybe getting some shots that he should have gotten at the end of the game that might have resulted in a win. And I don't, people might want to talk about, why do you take the one-legged 3 at the end? It's like, well, when you consider how the past 2, one, he wanted to be flashy and wanted to see if he could have a moment. And that's just, as much as we talk about him being, super humble, that's the kind of Mamba inside of him, if you will, that also people have alluded to. But also the fact that he didn't get the ball on those past 2 possessions and had wide open 3 shot attempts on both of them. He just had to go take it. And that's the thing where, a lot of people obviously are going to get mad at that, rightfully so. But that kind of goes back to the thing where I'm talking about, like, look, as much as it may sound crazy to say, Malachi and those guys have been told to do that over the past year. As much as that's not going to be their role, in their careers moving forward, like when you take in the context of last season, it's actually not that crazy for them to think they should take the shot. They just are forgetting that,
they literally are forgetting.
That dude's on the court. Like, you have that guy now, right?
They literally are forgetting, because every time Malachi did it more than anybody. When he passed it to Wemby in the post, or like fed him in like the mid-range area, the elbow, like he would like have the ball, and at first he would like look like he was gonna make a move, and then he'd be like, oh yeah, like literally I saw in his head he was like, oh yeah,
I know the play exactly what you're doing.
And he's like kind of hesitated and like dumped it in kind of like haphazardly, and it's like, oh, he literally is forgetting that that's not Zach Collins, that's Victor Wembanyama. Like, it's just not clicking yet. So, but they'll get it down.
There's a play on the baseline where he kind of got swarmed, where it seemed like he was about to go up with the shot, and he passed it back. I think that's what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah. That one and another one where Wemby got it, like, right below the free throw line. It was where he faded away and hit a Dirk one-legged fadeaway.
Okay. Speaking of classic moves, Ethan, there's the one play in the post where they got it to him, and he looks around and just moves for you know exactly what it is, because who did it remind you of, Ethan?
Timmy Duncan, baby, off the bank. The bank is open.
When I saw that, I was like,
me
oh
too,
my gosh,
me too.
he can just hold it. He can just sit there. Like, if nothing comes from the motion or the floppies or whatever we're running, he could just do that little move. It was just, like you said, it was so Timmy-esque, dude. That made me so happy. I know it's Summer League. He's got a lot to learn. But the fact that he showed that off on top of all the other crazy stuff he does, the moment for me, Ethan, though, when I knew it was on, it wasn't, I texted you after the 2 dunks, but when he hit, I forget who he took off the dribble. I think it was Jabari Smith. Or no, not Jabari Smith. Excuse me. Jabari Walker. When he just took him off the dribble from the wing, I think it was the right wing.
Yep.
And then just hit that step back, fadeaway, mid-range jumper, like in between the free throw line and the 3-point line, just in his face, fading away. And there was no contest, though, because he's so tall. And it just swish. I was like, oh, okay, never mind. He's here. All right. Because it's like, when you see that as a Spurs fan after the past, really since 2017, it's just like, oh, wow. But when I saw that, I could tell, like, okay, he's feeling a little bit better.
Toward the end of the game, too, when he, who was it? I think it was Blake, and he shut down some action that was going left side, and we were down by like 1, and this got us the ball back, and it was like a 24-second violation. And there was a moment where he like clapped, and then he did like that with his, and it looked just like Tim Duncan. Bro, he looked just like Timmy, because you remember Timmy always did that.
Dude, there's a play of him in the French league during the playoffs where he literally just goes, the Tim Duncan, just like Jokic
Kobe
did
too.
In the final. Yeah, Kobe too. Right. I'm trying to think if I have any other analysis of him from the second game. It was just a complete bounce back game, an efficient scoring night. He looked like what you saw in the highlights more. I wish I had more in-depth analysis, but I think that's probably the best way to describe it.
For sure.
And so you love to see that. I know we talked about it a little bit, Ethan, but to end off here, let's talk about the big news, which is Tim Bontemps reporting today that he is going to be shut down now. He's going to San Antonio. He's disappearing. The only unhealthy food he's eating is breakfast tacos. And he's going to come back, and him and CD are doing a Spanish HEB commercial. Well, it's going to be a Spanish-English. It's going to be like a little bit of both. Maybe some French in there too. A 3-language HEB commercial before the preseason game. That's the next time we'll see him. No, seriously though, what do you think about the decision to shut him down? And then also the fact that he is about to go disappear.
I love it. And I don't know if you watched NBA Today. I was listening to it when I was at the gym today. Kendrick Perkins was like, he can't run away from the hype. He's the number 1 pick. He can't run away from the media. This is what he wants. He needs to be front and center. This is his job now. And it's like, no, it's not. Tim Duncan was the number 1 pick. Tim Duncan was the greatest player to come out of the draft or whatever at the time, MVP, Defensive Player of the Year. And he didn't do one interview his entire year. We didn't see a Tim Duncan interview from rookie year until he made the Hall of Fame. So I'm happy Victor has decided to go to San Antonio and hide under a rock. Not hide, go under a rock and work on his game. He will be in the lab with no cameras, with no hype around him, because it's San Antonio and ESPN has a distaste for that city. So they won't be there to cover him. And I'm excited. He's going to be getting his rest.
They'll be there.
He won't be fatigued.
But they won't let him in.
He will get his rest. Yeah, Pop's not going to let them in at the gym. They're not going to be able to see him. But I am completely behind his decision. I think it's a very Spurs move.
Yeah. I mean, it's literally the most Spurs move.
Yeah. Can't get any more San Antonio.
But I'm just, I think that what that told me was that they saw what they needed to see. And I think you might have said that earlier in the podcast, but just that decision was like, okay, the Spurs feel good about that performance, and there's no reason to push it any further. And he said he wanted to get better every game. And this is a very optimistic view of looking at things, but if he were to continue on that trajectory, it's like, okay, does he really need to be getting like 30 and 15? I know it was 27 and 12, but y'all get what I'm saying. Does he really need to be getting 20 and 10 every game in the summer league with the risk of being injured? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, no, he doesn't. He needs to, honestly, he probably should be practicing going hard with Keldon. Like, you know what I'm saying, at the rim, or with Zach. He should be working with those guys more. And that's who he flew with from San Antonio. I don't know if you heard that nugget as well. He talked about that in the press conference. When he stayed back, he was with all the guys who are on the team now who were there on the sideline. Charles Bassett, Jeremy Sohan, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson. You saw all those guys.
Devontae Graham.
Devontae Graham. Can't forget Devontae Graham. But they all flew with him. They all flew as a team from San Antonio. When he stayed back at the California Classic, he was working with them. So I think that's what he's going to be doing a lot of. I think it's the best decision for managing his workload. I think it's the best decision for his health. And I think that on top of, with the bounce back performance, it's probably the best decision optically if you want to go in and kind of go under a rock. Now, the Spurs don't really care too much about that, but that is just another benefit. I think the main thing for me is I mean, I'm just going to say, I mean, the Spurs are confident in it, so I feel good about it. And you can say that that's crazy as a Spurs fan, but I think objectively, me and you have talked about this, Ethan. Like, this franchise hasn't had the success that they've had for no reason. Yes, we've lost some people along the way, but Brian Wright's plan is played out perfectly. Trust in the organization. They have the guardrails set up. Everybody's talking about it on ESPN. And I think this is just a part of their plan and the process. And I think it's a good idea, especially when you consider the fact that he's going to get more rest with not having to play FIBA, and he's going to get more time with his teammates, which will be good to practice against and to build chemistry with for the season.
Couldn't agree more with you, Mr. Jude.
There is one more piece of news, though, Ethan. I thought we were going to be done after that. But you know that there's a giant piece of news, actually, and that's that Greg Popovich has signed a 5-year contract extension. And, you know, we're kind of too young to really remember this. I mean, I do remember the last contract extension when they announced it was going to be a 3-year deal, but it wasn't announced like this one still at the same time. It was kind of like he signed an extension and then you got the details later. And that's what all of the ESPN people have been talking about, too. I think it was actually today. It was Brian Windhorst's podcast. It might have been the same one you listened to. And he was talking about how there's never been a contract, like especially a Popovich contract. Well, I say never been in the Spurs, I mean, but especially under Popovich, there's never been a contract announcement like this where they're just like, here's all the details. Here's Pop. Like, he's back. It's 5 years. Here's how much money he's getting paid. Usually it's like a Pop's coming back and then they release it quietly, which is kind of how the Spurs do everything. So, you know, I that's just really the short answer to why they did that is Wembanyama, for why it was so public. But the flip side of that, Ethan, is we're going to have, there is I was about to say we're going to have Pop around for another 5 years. That's actually not guaranteed. I think we'll at least have him around for like another 3. But they were saying right. He's what is he? The president? Right. So he can fire himself, but the thing is there's some exception in there that basically says like he may not finish out all 5 years, but he also may do that. But he's coming back for the foreseeable future, Ethan.
Yeah, this was just a public statement to the league and to Wemby saying that Pop will be there to build the foundation that will take us into the next dynasty, so to speak. So I'm a fan of it. We announced it like we just signed LeBron James. I think it's hilarious. I know. It was like a free agency signing. Like, yes.
And it was funny too because he'd like been at Summer League. It was like we all knew he was coming back. Yeah.
He wasn't on contract, but he was. There's a play. Sohan talked about it too. They asked him about it at like halftime, and he was like, "Yeah, I mean, he's been around. Like, I kind of figured." He's like, "I kind of figured he'd sign a contract extension, but yeah."
Oh my gosh. Well, Ethan, any final thoughts on this episode of SSPN?
Can't wait for October, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're still going to be coming back with you with some more Summer League content because as much as these first 2 games were interesting, I think that it's going to be easier for the Summer League team now, like we saw in the California Classic. So we're going to keep getting evals on those guys: Blake, Malachi, Champagny, Barlow, Ceedy. I wonder if we'll get Serge Rice hasn't really suited up yet. He's just kind of been in a hoodie. Maybe with Wemby leaving, he starts to get into the rotation. And also, oh, okay. Well, there you go. But Eric Stevenson, we got a comment about him in the last one, and I should have mentioned him because he's just a little bucket getter on the Spurs team, Ethan. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. He got 4 points.
I know that was the last game, but he had a lot better games in the California Classic.
I know. I'm just making fun of the comment. And he passed up on an open 3.
Oh, my goodness. Anyways.
Let's also mention Milner. He also didn't play. And Bediako had 7 minutes.
Okay. The one thing I will give him is Stevenson actually had a decent.
No, he had a good game too.
He had the good California Classic. He had a good game. He actually didn't have a good game too. He had a good game 1, 2, and 3. Yeah.
Whatever it was. He won't be on the team.
He won't be on the team, and that's what I told him in the comments. We're not trying to hate on y'all for if you who made that comment are still here at the 40-minute mark.
Jude's nicer than I am.
Much love to you, but
half love from me.
Oh my gosh. Well, anyways, the point is we're going to be here for the Summer League content coming up, and we're going to get more evals on a lot of these other guys. So it's not completely done, although the Wembanyama content is done, and I'm going to miss him until October, Ethan. I'm excited that we still got another 7 days. Hopefully, well, probably not another 7 days, but at least another couple more games of Spurs hoops in Summer League.
I miss Tommy Kuzi. That's all I got to say about it.
Where's Jeff Ledbetter, man?
Yeah, where's Jeff Ledbetter? Oh, Jeff.
Oh my gosh. All right, guys. Well, if you enjoyed the content today, don't forget to hit that like button below and also to hit that subscribe button below as well. We're almost to 1.5K subs. We appreciate you guys for all of the support. And if you want to stay updated with the show, be sure to follow us on Twitter at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. I make the post whenever all of our podcasts are out and also do some alerts as well whenever we got a new video coming out that day. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch you on the next one. Go Spurs, go.